Direct from Kansas City, it's Comic Book Late Night with Captain Logan. Tonight, Captain Logan welcomes the Gorgeous Geeks. And now, here's your host, Captain Logan!
Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to Comic Book Late Night. I am indeed Captain Logan. So, I went and saw Thor this weekend, really enjoyed it, had a great time, and the visual effects are magnificent. And you know, the first thing I thought when I saw the bridge to Asgard was, man, they've really dumbed down Mario Kart. Like, this is the easiest Rainbow Road I have ever seen. Anthony Hopkins playing Odin, great choice for Odin. His performance is wonderful, and I wish I was as important as Odin. You know, like, how cool would it be to be so important that your own first name is in front of everything you say? Without giving too much away, there's a point in the film where Odin falls into this deep sleep called the Odin sleep. Like, isn't it Odin sleep every time he goes to sleep? It's like no, there's sleep, and then there's the Odin sleep, and then like, he's so important, he has to say Odin in front of his own son's name. He's like, Thor, son of Odin. Like, he's that important that he has to use his own name when he talks about his own son. In fact, like, I wish I was that important. I wish, like, when my wife wakes me up in the morning, I could be like, nope, you can't get me up right now. I'm in the Captain Logan sleep. Like, that'd be fantastic. When we got there, Vince and I went and saw the movie together, and when we got there was this group of Star Trek fans who were all dressed up in Trek uniforms. And now, I'm not going to begrudge anybody wearing a Trek uniform to a movie, because, you know who I am and how big I am into Star Trek, but I did find it kind of strange at Thor. And I walked up to them, and I said, so, you guys big Marvel fans? And they said, no, we heard Loki was in this movie, and I had to spend the next 5 minutes explaining to them that at no point in the film would they see anyone who was white on one side and black on the other. The movie did pretty well. Its opening weekend did okay, did about $65 million, and not huge guns comparatively, but pretty good. I gotta say though, it's probably a good thing that Thor is not as popular as Superman, because you know, parents over the years have always been worried about their kids trying to put on a cape and fly, like they're gonna jump off a roof and fly. But the thing is, if you're a good enough parent, you can probably keep your kid from doing that, but if they think they can fly the way Thor does it, and they get a hammer and start, like swinging it around mom's good china, that's a little harder to stop, so it's probably a good thing that he's not quite as popular. I wish I had the power that Stan Lee has. Like, forget Odin. What about the power of Stan Lee? What happens when Stan Lee goes into the Stan Lee sleep? Here's how much power Stan Lee has. Stan Lee named the Hammer of Thor Mjolnir, and everyone throughout the years has accepted that the pronunciation of it is Mjolnir. But I heard an interview with him several years ago, about 10 years ago now, where Stan Lee is saying that people have asked him how to pronounce it, and he says, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just in print. That's how it's spelled, and you can pronounce it any way you want to. Here's how much power Stan Lee has. Everyone in this movie calls it Mjolnir, and what if Stan Lee, when the movie hits about $100 million or so, were to suddenly go on record and put out a press release like he was all totally upset and said that everyone was pronouncing Mjolnir wrong. Like, it was really supposed to be called, like, Mulligan, or Microsoft, or Maraschino Cherries, or Megan Fox, and then nobody could stop him because he's Stan Lee. That's how much power Stan Lee has. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to change up the order a little bit tonight, and so let's do a trivia question right now before we go to the desk, shall we? So today's trivia question is, Odin is the father of Thor, but who is Odin's father? That's the trivia question for today. Who is Odin's father? If you think you know, leave your answer in the comments below. I'll be sure to mention the first person to get it right in next week's episode. And last week's question was, the Punisher first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 129. What supervillain appeared alongside the Punisher in that issue? The correct answer there was the Jackal, and that was first answered by OA Cape Crusader O. And now it's time for another wonderful edition of Know Your Batmobiles. Here's a Batmobile. Is it from 1999, 2001, or 2003? And I'll reveal the year at the end of the show. Got an action-packed show for you tonight. A little bit later, Vince is going to come on and help me review Thor, a good no-spoiler review. And also going to have Christina and Katrina on from the Gorgeous Geeks, talking about comics and TV and all kinds of fun stuff like that. This week, Flashpoint came out. Huge week for comics. I've got 6 books to review. So right now, it's time for rapid-fire comic reviews. Alright, let's go ahead and start things off with the Flashpoint stuff this week with Flash number 12. Mostly just setting up for Flashpoint, Jeff Johns wraps up his Flash series with a big reveal that honestly is a little callable, but it leads to another reveal that's really interesting. Minor spoiler warning, but this is necessary to even really talk about Flashpoint. We find out that Bart isn't the anomaly at all, but it's actually the Reverse Flash, who has tapped into a number of new powers with the Speed Force that Barry doesn't know about, including controlling his own aging. That's the really cool part. And presumably, that's also why Barry's the only one in Flashpoint who will realize reality has changed. It's a very emotional issue, and I like that it isn't just time travel for the sake of it. Barry's dealing with a lot of old issues, especially the death of his mother at the hands of the Reverse Flash. This one's definitely worth it for the art, which is just dynamite. I wish Flashpoint was continuing in this book instead of going on to its own mini, considering it just continues this story, but I understand that for whatever reason, event books sell. If you haven't been following this, look for the whole thing in trade when it's released. Some of John's best work. Now we go on to Flashpoint number 1. If you love alternate realities and Elseworld stories like I do, I think you're going to be impressed with this. It feels like an in-canon Elseworld story, where everything has changed except for Barry, and it's really epic, really imaginative, and yeah, I know I complain about events, but this is just my kind of event. In this universe, there is no Flash, there is no Superman, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman are tyrants vying for control over the world, and Batman practically owns Gotham. Everywhere you turn, there's a Wayne casino. The superheroes of this universe, some familiar and some only vaguely so, are banding together to deal with the threat of the Amazons and the Atlanteans, who have killed millions in their war. In the meantime, Barry goes looking for Bruce in the Batcave, which leads to one of the best ideas and most shocking reveals I've ever seen in a comic book. Also incredible art from Andy Kubert, who does a mean Batman and great detailed and lively landscapes. I'm just stoked for this series. And now let's go on to Batman Incorporated number 6. This issue was both fun and really frustrating for me all at the same time. We've gone from watching Bruce recruit someone each story arc to seeing lots of new Batman and Bruce gearing up to deal with Leviathan. The thing that really irks me is a storytelling device I've never really liked, and that's having our protagonists know a lot more than we do. This is becoming more plot-driven than I like. We should be in Bruce's head, and we should solve mysteries with him. The mystery shouldn't be in us trying to figure out what he knows already. Bruce has seen the future, and though he says it seems like a dream, he obviously knows key information we're not getting. His actions sometimes seem very strange, other times nearly out of character, and the hope, of course, is that it'll all make sense by the end. All of this would be fine if we were seeing it through the eyes of another character, but Bruce is the main character of the series, so from a narrative standpoint, it bothers me. Now, without that critical lens, yeah, I'm intrigued to finally know why exactly Bruce needs a whole army of Batman all over the world, though of course we're getting a lot more clues about that now, and more importantly, why he had to go on record to tell the world he's doing it. The weirdest thing is that this group of criminals, the average Joes, want to prove that Batman isn't a god, a rumor that started because he's everywhere now. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because Bruce went on TV and explained what Batman Inc. is. So how does that turn into a legend that he's a god? But the idea of trying to strike in enough places that Batman Inc. can't possibly be everywhere at once is clever, and how Bruce deals with it is even cleverer. I also appreciate that Morrison is dealing with why more people don't suspect Bruce is Batman now that he's come out and said he's funding Batman, though it's a bit of a leap in logic. Also not loving Chris Burnham's art. Bruce has a lot of goofy expressions on his face. I miss Yannick the cat. And now let's jump over to Red Robin number 23. Not a lot to say on this one, it's mostly set up for a new arc. We're finally getting back to more of Red Robin's personal stuff, especially his relationship with Lynx. The most interesting thing is how Red Robin interacts with Gordon, who doesn't entirely trust him. He needs to risk Lucius Fox's life for an operation, but Gordon isn't sure about him because he has a photo of Red Robin busting Lynx out of an immigration transport. There's also some cool interaction with Tim and Dick, and I like all the exposition about how much Tim respects Dick and his background in acrobatics. I wish I could be so comfortable in my own skin, he says. The actual plot we're investigating isn't real engaging until the end when Tim finds himself in a really dangerous situation. It looks like things will really pick up next issue. And now let's jump over to Spawn number 207. Great story here, not so hot on the dialogue. Will Carlton has gotten the writing credit the last 7 issues, but somehow these don't sound like the same realistic exchanges we were getting in 201 to 204 or so. I get that the costume is changing Jim, but again, he's coming off as whiny. What made Jim interesting as Spawn was how understated he was. Now he just sounds like Al, and Twitch doesn't entirely sound like himself either. But the story is great. Jim is using his powers in really interesting ways, like how he uses maggots to eat away at Twitch's gun at the beginning. There's a creature that goes after Sam, who's apparently appeared in the Hellspawn book, which I'm not familiar with. She's chased down by a cop named Rowan, and she threatens that hell is coming to Earth, so that's a cool development. And there's a huge surprise at the end, which looks like a big game changer. Overall, fantastic stuff, but I think the dialogue was just a little bit on the lazy side. And finally, let's go to Marvel and look at FF number 3. It takes the whole issue, but we finally discover why Val is helping Dr. Doom to defeat Reed, and I gotta say, Hickman is brilliant. It makes perfect sense, and it's really fun and interesting. The team pulls together a lot of the Fantastic Four's greatest enemies all in one room to theoretically discuss how to beat Reed, and Reed's there too. It's very confusing until the last pages when it all becomes clear, and I won't spoil anything other than it's such a big deal that the Watcher is there. FF has some of the most effective and engaging storytelling in Marvel right now, and now that we've had 3 issues, I'll say it. Forget all those jabs I made about it before. Try this out if you're looking for something fresh in a superhero title. And like I said last week, I'm just kind of waiting for Spider-Man to do something. Well, that's it for new comic reviews, and now, on to the news. Not a whole bunch I want to talk about this week, just a couple things, but the big one is one of the Avengers scripts got stolen. Sam Jackson's shooting script was lifted, and there were photos of it running around last week, and everybody was kind of wondering where it came from and how somebody got hold of it, and it turns out, yep, it was stolen. And this is bad because it's stalling out the Avengers production, and they went into production last week, I think, and they're stopping production now so that they can rewrite those scenes. So, yeah, that's terrible. Hopefully those weren't some of the best scenes in the movie, because it's awful that you've got to go back and rewrite things just because the general populace has now seen them. I don't know why people do things like this. It's absolutely terrible. So anyway, that's the development there. So as I said in the monologue, Thor hit 65 million opening weekend, which is pretty good. Not as good attendance-wise as a lot of people were kind of hoping for, and you gotta consider inflation. 65 million isn't as much attendance-wise now as it would have been 7 or 8 years ago. So apparently even like the first Hulk movie in 03 beat attendance for Thor, but Thor did beat movies like Daredevil and Ghost Rider. Thor's kind of a niche thing, so that doesn't entirely surprise me. I'm glad that it did as well as it did, and I would expect Captain America will do quite a bit better. This next bit of news has really nothing to do with comic books, but it's my show and I wanted to talk about it, so I'm going to. I thought some of our Star Trek viewers might appreciate this. So, funniest thing I've seen all month so far, apparently there was a German newscast that accidentally showed a fan-made logo for the Maquis when talking about the covert ops team that took out Bin Laden. And so instead of putting up the logo for those Navy SEALs, they accidentally put up this hilarious Maquis logo. And you'd think that the skull with the Klingon forehead ridges and the batless at the bottom would have tipped them off immediately, but this guy just ran with it and thought that was actually the logo, and even said something along the lines of, well, they don't put a skull on there for nothing. Anyway, absolutely cracked me up. That's all I want to talk about for news, and now here is my and Vince's Thor review. Now, let me preface this by saying that we shot this on Free Comic Book Day. We went to Free Comic Book Day, and we shot all day there and talked to people, and then after that, we went and saw Thor. And so that's why we're wearing, the Free Comic Book t-shirts and stuff. And I've seen it a second time since then, and I think, I can't speak for Vince, but I was a little bit harsh on it, I think, on first viewing. I actually enjoyed it a lot more the second time around. So take that with a grain of salt, and here is our first impression Thor review right now. Take a look. So Vince, what was your gut reaction?
My gut reaction was that it was okay for what it was.
Yeah?
It wasn't a bad movie. I just thought it was more like an exercise, how do we bring Thor to film? So we got a lot of really good spectacles. We got a lot of fantastic action, a lot of really pretty special effects, and we had some really interesting characterizations. But as far as the story goes, I thought I got a little confused.
When Thor ends up on Earth, and he's kind of wandering around trying to figure out what he's going to do with himself. That's when the movie really starts to drag for me.
Yeah, that's what I mean by confused, because it starts getting lost on who's the main character of this movie. Because, in my opinion, the focus shifts over more to Loki, but the big choice is made by Thor.
I'm not sure the focus shifts so much as Loki's just more interesting.
That could be. I mean, because Thor becomes he becomes inactive. He's not proactive about anything for about 30 minutes.
Making it sound worse than it is. It's a really competent movie, and
it's a pretty solid.
When I found out that Branagh was gonna get this movie, I was really excited. And when I saw Branagh do this movie, I was really excited. He was totally the right guy for this. It's epic. He gets the Norse stuff. Again, had it not been Marvel Studios, had it not been for a general audience, he would have done more with it. He would have done more with the mythos, I think. But again, for what it is, it looks super cool. And what will really stick with me is, like you said, the visual spectacle. Asgard looks amazing.
Yes.
It's CG, but it's really amazing looking. The Rainbow Bridge is the coolest thing in the whole movie. That will stick with me forever. I love that.
I mean, you say that and it sounds really strange, but when you see the movie, the beauty of it is they've managed to mix the magic and the mechanical, and everything seems to kind of flow together in this sort of a mechanical circuitry way. You know what I mean?
Thematically, one of the big things in the movie is about magic and science and how they mix, and one is one the other, and that kind of thing. And that was totally the way to go with this. Eventually, we're going to get Avengers, and how is the very science fiction Iron Man, very science fiction Incredible Hulk going to mix with the very cosmic Thor? And I think it totally worked. Thor himself was never a character that really excited me. And here he kind of did. I really loved his characterization. I loved the way he was written, because his language, and I didn't feel like it was too dumbed down, his language is very different from the way regular people in America talk, and yet it wasn't too thick, it wasn't obnoxious, it wasn't filled with thous and thys and stuff like that.
They made it mesh well with our modern sensibilities to a certain extent. But one of the things that I thought was good was that he had this sense of humor towards the mortals around him while he was on Earth. Like, he would do something, and I'm not going to say what they were because I don't want to ruin those things, but he would do something that would be very indicative of where he came from. But the people on Earth would say, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And Thor would be, "All right then, we'll entertain your mortal ways."
Yeah.
And he'd get that little smile on his face, or he'd just look at you like you're strange.
I also was a little bit worried when he gets to Earth that we were going to have that kind of movie where you've got the guy from a different place, or from a different time, if you will, who they spend a whole bunch of the movie playing up the comedy of he doesn't get this place and he's trying to figure out what things are, what technology is, how the vernacular works, and that kind of thing. And that wasn't too silly. That wasn't too played up. And the few places that they did a joke or two like that, they were the funniest parts of the movie.
Yeah, and they managed to work well with the situation. It wasn't so much intrusive as it was fairly, to some extent, organic to the situation. I don't know about you, but I thought S.H.I.E.L.D. was a little overused in this.
I thought a little bit too, and I was somewhat worried about that when it started. It wasn't terrible. They were necessary. I'll say that. I thought that they were necessary.
I think S.H.I.E.L.D. was used well to a certain extent. I think that S.H.I.E.L.D. in certain parts of the movie was so integrated into the plot that, I could just accept that feds would come in and do the things that they did. Around about the middle of the movie, I'm seeing something go on that I'm saying, why are we spending time with these guys? Because at the end of this, none of this is going to matter. And I just knew it was coming, and lo and behold, it was right.
But as an action movie, I thought it was superior to, in a lot of ways, Incredible Hulk and the Iron Man films. I thought the fight scenes were incredibly well choreographed, a whole lot of fun to watch. I enjoyed every moment of that and didn't feel like it was too actiony. Like, I really was having a good time with it.
An interesting reason, and it would almost have to be this way, is
also,
that...
his flying, really cool looking.
Yeah, really.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But it almost have to be, like, if you were to look at things logically, it would almost have to be more action-packed, or at least a better action, because Hulk isn't a guy who's a trained fighter. He's just a guy who's brutal, so, you want brutality to come through more in those films. And Iron Man, well, Tony Stark builds weapons, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's using stuff that has been used for years and years and years. These are new weapons. He's got to figure out how to use this stuff.
Other question I have for you real quick is, did you feel that the love interest was a little too typical?
I felt it was a little convenient. She seemed to be a little gaga over him because of the fact that he's an extremely built guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
little bit too much of that going on.
It seemed
my taste.
It seemed more like, you're hot, I'm hot. What's the deal? This should be a natural thing.
Maybe a little bit. Portman was good. I didn't have a problem with her. She wasn't irritating or anything. But
I mean, she's a professional. She managed to make it work the best that she could.
I'm recommending the film.
Yeah, I do too. It's a pretty good film.
Well, Vince, thanks for reviewing the movie with me. Appreciate it.
Indeed.
Back to the show. Today's Obscure Character of the Week is brought to you by Cosmic Radiation, having the ability to either make you wicked awesome or wicked depressed. Use as directed. Have you ever heard of Captain Ultra? First appearing in FF number 177 in 1976, Griffin Gogol is a plumber who renders services for an elderly psychologist, and the guy can't pay him, so he instead offers to cure Griffin's smoking habit through hypnosis. Griffin naturally decides, sure, what could possibly go wrong? And of course, the elderly psychologist turns out to be an alien whose hypnosis unlocks Griffin's latent superhuman powers. All of them, including super strength, flight, endurance, and enhanced reflexes. So Griffin becomes Captain Ultra and tries to join the Frightful Four. At first they accept him with open arms until they realize he's afraid of fire, after he faints at the sight of a cigarette being lit up. He later fights with the Defenders, but doesn't really like the team very much, so he never tries to officially join. He has a stint as a minor superhero, fighting with Thor among others, and eventually becomes a stand-up comedian. About this time he ends up fighting who else but Eckler, the demon without humor. After doing that for a while, he becomes the leader of the Nebraska branch of the Initiative after Civil War. It just goes to show that it takes more than just being incredibly powerful for anyone to notice you. And thanks to Nightspawn again for suggesting this week's Obscure Character. Hey, if you have a suggestion for Obscure Character of the Week, or some fan art you want to show off, something you want me to talk about on the show, either a review or a question you want to ask, anything like that, feel free to send me a personal question over Geekvolution, and I'd love to hear from you. You can also send me a package or a letter to Geekvolution's P.O. Box. My special guests tonight are Christina and Katrina from the Gorgeous Geeks. They review comics and TV shows and movies and things weekly on their YouTube channel, The Gorgeous Geeks. And they've also interviewed several people in the industry, actors and comic book creators alike. Please welcome them now. Take a listen. Okay, and I'm here with the Gorgeous Geeks. I've got Christina and Katrina on the line. The Gorgeous Geeks are there's actually three of you. Gina is not with them tonight, but they are three ladies very knowledgeable about comics and superheroes and a myriad other geeky properties. They do weekly reviews of various television shows, rants about comics, movie reviews, and interviews with creators at conventions. They have a very unique take on pop culture, and it's a pleasure to have them here on Comic Book Late Night. Now, before we get started, would you guys briefly talk a little bit about how the three of you gotten into comics and geek culture in general, and are the three of you really sisters?
Yeah, we're really sisters. Yeah, some years ago, I think our parents got together and decided to have some babies, and they had 7, and 6 girls, 1 boy. Gina's the oldest. Then there's my brother, and then there's me, Katrina, and then Christina's right underneath me. And Gina loves to tell the story. It's too bad she's not here, but when they got into comic books, well, I started a little bit later, but my grandfather would give my dad comic books even before he could even read, and so he was so excited to go to school to learn how to read so he could read his comic books. So he was disappointed when he didn't learn how to read on like the first day of school. But we were on a missionary trip, or Katrina was rather, because I wasn't there. I was too young at the time. Yeah, and so this is a time before, I was 8 years old, so it was a time before like DVDs in the car and stuff like that. So for entertainment, it was a 3-day trip to Calgary, Canada, from Michigan to there. And so our dad decided to take his favorite hobby, which was comic books, and just bring 2 or 3 big cases and fill them up in the car. And so we would just read them for 3 days up, to get to Canada. And so we just ended up falling in love with comic books, and we just took on our dad's hobby, and we've just been collecting and reading since. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I just started picking them up after they had started picking them up, and I don't know. It just when I started, I just was consistent with it, and I really fell in love with it too. And the youngest shall follow.
Well, are you ready to go into the very ominous comic grill?
I'm a little scared. I am too.
All right, here we go.
Question number 1. Have you managed to make very many female friends with the same interests in comic books, science fiction, etc.?
Very few. I mean, most of the time, like the girl fans, they're usually fans of like anime more so than comic books.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you go to like an anime convention, it's probably mostly girls. Period. You go to a comic book convention, I'd say there's probably like, I don't know, 75% guys, and you know, and so most of the girls they meet or encounter, they're mostly anime girls. We're not really so much comic book girls. Every time we go to a comic book store, it's usually just guys there.
Right.
I have a different story, kind of, because I've been blessed to have friends that actually are into comic books, and I can say a majority of my friends I got because they were drawing something anime related, or I said something about comic books, and they're like, "Oh, that's cool," and I'm like, "Brain, I'm alerting you. This is my new best friend." So I've got friends that are into it, and we're not really girly girls. I mean, we like to dress up and look nice and stuff, but, you know, I don't have friends. I'm your friend. I don't. I actually do, but actually most of my friends are guys. So I guess because I live with so many women, I just, I'm just looking for that testosterone that's missing from my life, so most of my friends are guys. So.
See, part of the reason I asked if you guys were really sisters is I watched a video where a couple of your younger sisters were there, and I was like, okay, now are they really all sisters?
Yeah, there are 6 girls.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Christina, Sabrina, Angelina, and Tina. Our parents have a sense of humor.
Each of you individually, do you generally prefer Marvel or DC?
I'm going to say Marvel. Well, that was Christina's answer. Well, it just depends. Like, right now, I would have to say it's Marvel. It just depends which company isn't upsetting me. Like, at the moment, I couldn't really get with the Blackest Night stuff. I don't really like Green Lantern that much, so when going into Blackest Night, I was like, I'm switching to Marvel now. I think Civil War was probably one of my favorite series of all time. We will never forget One More Day Ever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We have that in common.
But also in DC, like, that whole Emperor Joker thing with Superman, I think that was also one of my favorites. So it just depends. For the moment, I have to say Marvel too, but that's just at this moment until somebody makes me upset.
Question number 3. You guys regularly do reviews of a number of TV shows, but one of them is the Vampire Diaries. And I was wondering, in any medium, what is your favorite property associated with vampires?
Wow. I don't know, because I'm a huge Joss Whedon fan as well, and I really love the Buffy and Angel. Yeah, more so Angel than Buffy. Yeah, like Angel was really good, and I think Joss Whedon, like everything he touches, like turns to gold to me. So I'll be severely disappointed if I don't like the Avengers movie. I will too. So
Yeah.
I say Angel. Angel, yeah. Yeah, I'd probably say Angel had so many twists and turns, and they never forgot anything. I really do love the Vampire Diaries. Give it a couple more seasons, and we'll see how it matches up. Because that show is, you can't expect anything. It's a really well-written show with a lot of great actors. And I highly recommend it to anybody who's thinking about watching it and think it's just another cliche vampire thing. A lot of people rag on it and say, Twilight, they're ripping off Twilight, but if anyone really had any knowledge of it, they would know that that novel was written before Twilight. I know the vampire thing is just huge right now, but, I mean, it's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I'm really surprised you guys pointed to Angel. I think I have 2 new friends.
Do you remember the episode Smile Time?
Oh, absolutely.
Got turned into the puppet?
Oh, my wife makes me put that on every couple months.
I have the replica. I think we got it maybe when it first came out. Gina got it for Katrina for her birthday.
Wow.
It's sitting right behind our hammer. We're staring at it right now.
Question number 4. If you would recommend to our viewers who maybe don't have a pull list right now and aren't sure what to get into, could you recommend one single ongoing comic you think somebody ought to be following right now?
I would say it's, mainstream is always okay, and they always end up repeating stories and things, so you can always kind of get on at any time to whichever one, to follow anybody, because you already know so much about them. But I think Invincible I was going to say Invincible. Invincible, that is a great story to get onto, and I just, you pick it up and just like, oh, well, it's kind of like the other stories, but when you start reading it, like, it's so much more, and it's funny, it's humorous, I love it. And I mean, we do love our mainstream comic books. We recommend usually Batman, Superman to a lot of people, and Deadpool is always funny if you're looking just for something hysterical, but there's a lot of history with those comic books, so if you're just looking for something just to get into, I would recommend Invincible. But, I mean, you don't have to go regular comic books if you don't want to. I mean, mangas are essentially the same thing. They're just, Japanese. But, I mean, of course, we read the translated English ones. But, there's a comic book for everybody in every genre. It doesn't have to be superhero related. And there's a lot of good indie comics out there. Yeah, a lot of them. When we went to C2E2, we met the editor-in-chief of Archaea Comics, Stephen Christie, and their company, they don't do superhero comic books, basically because, well, how are they going to outdo Marvel and DC? So they just kind of do their own thing. So they just have a huge range of different comic books. So, I mean, there's avenues out there for different kind of people. So it doesn't have to be superhero. It can be about, there's an anime called The Prince of Tennis. Sounds so exciting. Funimation has an anime right now about ingredients or something, and these chefs finding ingredients for... Just stop. Just stop.
Okay, final question. I don't think I can get off with you guys without bringing up Smallville. And so, what would you say is the best episode of this season?
The best episode, the mirror episode. I don't remember what the heck it was called that came on this season. That episode, because I love Tom Welling, but my goodness, when he became this other evil suave, like, he's been evil before, but he was never evil like this, and it was just, I was just like in love, and I think that's a bad thing. It is a bad thing, but it's also a good thing in a totally different way, and I just loved it, and everybody just did such a great job on that episode. Well, I think my answer would probably be, I thought season 9 was probably their best season yet. After, like, the first season was new and everybody loved it, and then it was good, but it started getting repetitive, and then, I don't know, it started going downhill for me. In season 8, it started picking up again, but a lot of people rag on season 8 because it was very anticlimactic with Doomsday, but if you forget about that, then I think it was still a good season. But season 9 was really fantastic. I don't care what anyone says, I loved Callum Blue as Zod, and I think my favorite episode might be Sacrifice. Oh, that was good. That was a good episode.
Well, guys, thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody be sure and check out the Gorgeous Geeks. That is their YouTube channel name. Do you guys have a website?
Yeah, thegorgeousgeeks.com.
So thanks again, everybody. Check them out. And now, back to the show.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to find out what I've pulled from the incredible Comic Vault. Today on the Comic Vault, we're going to take a look at Brian Michael Bendis' Sam and Twitch #1. Bendis is just the guy to write a hard-boiled Sam and Twitch book. He's got a perfect handle on the characters and their relationship. They bicker, they complain, Twitch complains about Sam's weight, Sam complains about everything, but they have that genuine affection for each other that always made them so much fun to read in the main Spawn title. This is during that period when they tried out being private investigators. They can't get any work, and they're luckily brought back onto the force to investigate a really weird case. In a murder scene, 4 disembodied thumbs are found, and after they're analyzed, it appears they're all from the same person, and that each is genetically less developed than the last. Later, they find 4 ears that are the same way. I would have appreciated a little more story this first issue. Bendis is working hard to really establish Sam and Twitch's characters, which takes up a lot of pages. It is entertaining, even to someone who already knows them. I appreciate how readable this is, even if you don't know Spawn, and if you're one of the people who wanted to like Spawn but just couldn't get into McFarlane's writing or didn't care where he took the character, I'd recommend trying this, especially if you like detective stories and hard crime drama. The language is more vulgar than in the main Spawn title, but it's well integrated and isn't too off-putting if you don't mind hard R language and you know what you're getting yourself into. I've always been a fan of Angel Medina's art, and he delivers in spades here. His work is gritty, dark, highly detailed, and slightly cartoony. He draws very exaggerated faces, but they don't come off as silly. The dialogue is done without balloons, which is stylistically appropriate, but it sometimes makes it difficult to tell what order you're supposed to read the dialogue in. I really enjoyed this and look forward to more. I highly recommend it to Spawn and non-Spawn fans alike. And now it's time once again to find out what the year was for this week's Batmobile. This week's Batmobile was from, in fact, 1999, and this appeared in the Batman graphic novel, Batman DOA. Well, hey, that's all the time I have for you tonight. I'd like to thank my very special guests, the Gorgeous Geeks, once again for being on the program. Thank you very much for watching. If you're ever in the Kansas City area, be sure to check out Pop Culture Comics in Overland Park, Kansas. That's my favorite comic book store and our official sponsor. Be sure to support your local comic book store. And remember, if you own something that only you are capable of picking up, just leave it out in the desert in New Mexico somewhere if you really want to mess with people. I'm Captain Logan, signing off.